for the delay. 30 seconds to introduce your question.
Yeah, this question relates to IBRC, the combination of Anglo-Irish Bank and Irish Nationwide, and how the special liquidation is supervised. It's supervised in the Department of Finance, and this question is seeking the Minister's views on a committee of inspection to increase the transparency and accountability into IBRC.
Deputy, firstly, I believe that it's important for me to set out the role of a committee for inspection in an ordinary liquidation and set out the legislative and factual context of the special liquidation of IBRC. The IBRC Act of 2013 specifically disapplied a number of provisions in the Companies Act of 1963 insofar as they applied to the liquidation of IBRC, including those relating to commissions of inspection. In the liquidation of IBRC, the Act conferred supervision of the liquidation to the Minister for Finance and provided the Minister with special powers in overseeing the liquidation of IBRC. In an ordinary liquidation, a committee of inspection allows the creditors of the company oversight of the liquidation and to have a say in the decisions of a liquidator regarding the liquidation. Under the Companies Act, there is no role for non-creditors of a company to participate in a committee of inspection. In the case of IBRC, at the point of liquidation, the make-up of a committee of inspection would likely have included representatives of the NTMA, NAMA and other unsecured creditors of the bank, potentially including employees and subordinated bondholders. It is important to note that the special liquidators have recently announced that all subordinated unsecured creditor claims and unsecured creditor interest claims outstanding will be paid in full, and as such it's the expectation that the only remaining creditor in the liquidation of IBRC will be the state as the sole shareholder of the entity. Furthermore, it remains open to any creditor of IBRC to apply to the High Court to determine any question arising in the winding up of IBRC, including the manner in which liquidations have occurred. I have been advised that no such determinations have been made.
As you do yourself, in February 2013, when we were presented with a piece of legislation, I think 10 or 11 o'clock at night, hardly having had time to read it, and it passed all stages by 5 o'clock the following morning. And clearly, the kind of scrutiny that would have been given to this and other issues wasn't afforded because this legislation had to be enacted before the markets opened the following morning. I don't think that this got the kind of attention that it needed to get, and indeed, given that the state, it's the people, it's that are carrying this, and you know that as well as anyone else, probably better, that the limits on public services and the extra taxation people had to pay is really what we're talking about here. And I think people have every right to feel that they can see how assets are disposed of. I find it unsatisfactory, Minister, that there isn't more transparency around the disposal of those assets, and that the supervision is within the department. You're clearly saying that you're not minded to change or to introduce a committee of inspection.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister.
The Deputy is correct in that. I mean, I do take your point that the legislation was passed at great speed. I remember the night very well and the circumstances of it. At this point, I should be clear to the Deputy and to the House that I don't have any plans to establish a committee of inspection in relation to the liquidation. I am satisfied that it has happened in a way that has been entirely appropriate, and that it has been in accordance with the law and with the legislation that was passed. As the Deputy is aware, what happens is a report is issued to provide the House with an update on the liquidation status of IBRC. And the special liquidators have now published, I believe, their 6th report in relation to this, to try to provide as much transparency as possible on what is a very significant issue. And if the Deputy might outline, what areas of concern she has in relation to particular areas that are not transparent, it might give me an opportunity to respond to that.
Thank you, Minister. Final comment, Deputy Murphy.
In many ways, it's how it's interrogated. For example, there's a fundamental difference between how NAMA was handled, where you have, for example, the CNAG has a role, and indeed there are people from that office that would be embedded within NAMA. We're talking about how assets are disposed of, but there's a degree of transparency there that is interrogated then by a committee of the Dáil. I don't think that it is as satisfactory in relation to IBRC, in relation to the kind of detail and the kind of interrogation. It's not to say that the assets are not disposed of entirely appropriately and for the best amount of money that can be got from them, but I think that that kind of transparency is a missing piece that I think was an error in how the legislation was framed.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Final comment, Minister.
I mean, where I do differ with you, Deputy, is I believe the progress reports that have been issued by the liquidator have tried to get the balance right between providing transparency and information to the House and also completing a liquidation that was and is immensely important to the financial progress of our state. As you know, in the different progress reports that have been published, they have at different times provided an update on the progress of the liquidation. It's provided information in relation to the sale of loans, information in relation to what is the cash flow of those sale of loans. It's provided information in relation to the fees that have been incurred as part of this liquidation. And then it's provided information in relation to the kind of work that still remains to be done. In particular, as you know, as we stand at the moment with the liquidation, we have approximately 93 different legal cases that are outstanding, and I do believe the reports that have been published have provided an update to the House on work that is underway. And, for example, through the Public Accounts Committee, officials in my own department have been subject to scrutiny there in relation to where the status of the liquidation is.
Thank you.